Hello, I am Roberto Cortopassi, and this is my final presentation for Econ 482, my capstone class. I did my capstone on NBA success and how you could quantify it, and how win shares influence basketball team outcomes. The research question that I was aiming to solve was, is there a way to use advanced metrics to predict how a team will perform? The seminal paper I used was Moxley and Town. That paper measures how player stability and potential predict long-term success in the NBA. It uses project future growth and variability in performance. I asked a similar question but applied it to NBA teams rather than individual players. This means I use the previous results and win shares to see how a team may perform season to season. Moxley and Town analyzed how early career performance, consistency, and potential indicators can predict long-term success in the NBA. It concluded that stability and opportunities for potential growth provide players with the greatest chance for long-term growth. For example, the study found that early career performance metrics, such as win shares, explain a significant portion of a player's future NBA success. I used three other articles. Potter and Eric, I believe that's how you pronounce it, examines the impact of advanced performance metrics on player evaluation and team success in the NBA. Rosen explores the economic determinants of player salaries in the NBA, focusing on how productivity and market forces influence compensation within the league. This article goes into more detail, stating that players that are inefficient offensive players will generally be paid more than efficient defensive players because offense in the NBA is seen as more valuable nowadays. Styro goes into detail on how things such as team chemistry and coaching can translate to long-term success beyond traditional metrics. There is not really an advanced statistic that takes into account of quality of coaching. However, there are data determinants gathered at the end of every NBA season that determine which coach they believe is the best. Hence the Coach of the Year award. The data description comes from the data comes from basketballreference.com. The raw data comes from basketballreference.com. Um, I used here's the average usage rate, average offensive rating, average defensive rating, and average win shares. It is important to note that you want a low defensive rating and a high offensive rating. In win shares, you want it to be the highest possible number, but a typical good player will have between 8 to 10 win shares, while the truly elite players will have above 12. For the data that I used, I had a minimum game requirement of 30 games. This was to ensure that players that got subbed in at the end of games and hit one shot did not skew the data violently. Here is a hexbin plot showing density by win share. This is important because you can see how most of the players on the left-hand side here are generally only getting around 1 to 2 win shares. But the truly elite players are generally winning a lot of games while also contributing to their team's overall success. You can see LeBron James and Kevin Durant on here twice, as well as Shaquille O'Neal. Keep in mind that the data set was only from 1997 to 2019. So players like Nikola Jokic, who are currently having incredible seasons averaging triple doubles, would also have high win shares, but they would not be included in the data set. On the left-hand side, I included the 5 lowest win share individuals. Emmanuel Mudiay stands out as he had a negative 2.1 win share. This is top 5 players by usage rate versus wins. Usage rate, generally speaking, means that your player gets the ball and they are a main facilitator in the offense. However, extremely high cases of usage rate can lead to negative team results. I included the top 5 players for usage rate in the data set. Notable standouts include Russell Westbrook, who won MVP this season, where he had a 40-plus usage rate, which is an NBA record. James Harden, who also won an MVP that season. Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade had both had successful seasons. However, you could see that their team kind of held it back, only totaling just under 50 wins. While DeMarcus Cousins had an incredibly high usage rate, but his team was so bad that he could not really do anything, thus the lack of team success. I used the following model, OLS, accounting for panel nature of the data to estimate the effect of win shares on team wins while controlling for other team level average statistics, such as offensive rating, defensive rating, and usage rate. The results that I gathered was higher win shares and offensive ratings are linked to more team wins, while heavy usage rate and poor defense are tied to fewer wins. As you can see by the data, low defensive rating generally correlates with better team success, while high offensive rating correlates with good team success or with better team success as well. Win shares, offensive rating, and good defensive rating all correlate with team wins positively, while high usage rate often signal weaker overall team performance. The limitations of my study may be missing pace of play data, team relocations or renamings. The reason why team relocations or renamings are included in this is because in the data, especially during this time frame, certain teams such as the Philadelphia 76ers had a series had a series of seasons where they would intentionally lose games and tank is what the word is for it, but it's intentionally losing games in order to secure a potential for a higher draft pick. This for the Sixers, it was called the process. Relocations and renamings was important because it could have signaled it made it I it made it more difficult to gather data from all of the teams. For example, the Vancouver Grizzlies moved to Memphis, which meant that Memphis didn't have the same amount of data, total data requirements, as, say, a team like the Lakers, which did not move. Renaming would be the Washington Bullets being renamed to the Washington Wizards. And factors like injuries or coach quality not being accounted for, as injuries could be limited to the fact that players such as Kevin Durant or Paul George would go down and all of a sudden their team would massively regress. And coaching quality, such as Spurs legend Greg Popovich, not being accounted for in group win share data. Future and policy implications. Future research should use advanced models like panel regressions and account for era differences, while teams should prioritize efficient, team oriented players rather than just high usage stars. A good example of this would be when the Los Angeles Lakers traded for Russell Westbrook, a player that on paper should have worked on their roster. However, because he was such a, I guess, ball dominant player, he was unable to have a good fit in their team, which resulted in worse team performance and fewer wins. When they traded him, their team drastically improved immediately. Thank you for listening to my presentation and have a good day. Here are my references. Have a good day.